Ferrari wins at home at Monza. How awesome is that? Bob Varsha, I am excited for Charles Leclerc. How about you, man?
Oh, absolutely. You heard it from the man himself. You were listening to the interviews. The two races you want to win if you're Charles Leclerc are Monaco at home and Monza, his second home for Ferrari. I kept having these flashbacks to 1988 when Enzo Ferrari had just died. A couple of weeks later, everybody's in Monza for the race. Ayrton Senna and the McLaren is wiping up the floor with everybody, but somehow managed to tangle with the Williams of Jean-Louis Schlesser and drop out of the race. And Ferrari, Gerhard Berger and Michele Alboreto, as I recall, finished first and second, and the place just went nuts. And I think you could sense that kind of energy in the crowd. Somebody on the radio at the end, when Leclerc was talking with all the key people on the pit wall, somebody was weeping. And I don't know if that was Leclerc himself or somebody else, but yeah, great moments, great moments.
Well, you could not only sense the crowd, you could hear the crowd on the
Oh yeah.
broadcast. And
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty
Absolutely.
cool. That was pretty amazing that you don't hear that very often. But we had about 4 or 5 laps to go, you could really start to hear them going, "Hey, this could happen. This is going to happen." You could feel
Right.
it. It
Yeah,
was great.
especially after Leclerc early in the race didn't think it would ever happen. You pitted me at the wrong time. Now what are we going to do? And then he just managed to coax the mileage out of those tires. Meanwhile, McLaren got their strategy wrong. Still finished 2-3, but you could sense when Oscar Piastri came in to park his car behind the number 2 sign, he knocked the thing 5 feet back and I think ran over the foot of an FIA
Oh,
scrutineer who was standing there. Yeah, and you can hear in his interview, Piastri knows that one got away. Should have been his, but it got away.
well, Bob, look, I'll have to admit, I drove from the studio to out Dakota and didn't, and actually had missed a bits of the race. But
Uh-huh.
let's talk about the strategies that went wrong and went great. Great for Ferrari, wrong for McLaren. Tell me your take on the strategy.
Well, we knew coming in that this new track surface was going to raise a lot of questions. And then, sure enough, we saw that the soft tires were graining like crazy, so they weren't going to be a factor in the race. So it was going to be hard medium. The question was, would you do one set of medium and one of hard, or two sets of one or the other if you decided to go to the alternate two-stop strategy? And all the minds were running the numbers, and I'm sure the satellite transmissions back to the war rooms in England and certainly down the road in Maranello
Back to the
were
Whopper.
plotting. Yeah, what could happen? What could happen? What can we do? Um, and the fact that Ferrari were able to pull this off tells us once again, there are mysteries out there. These are not formulaic races. This sort of thing happens because a lot of people put in their best effort. They get some things right, they get some things wrong. You get enough things right, you can pull off an improbable victory. And although Ferrari's been very competitive recently, I think this was a very improbable victory. And McLaren will rule the day. There was a great shot there at the end of the race of Fred Vasseur and Zak Brown hugging each other. And as Leclerc made his way in that black uniform to be congratulated by his crew, there was more than one orange McLaren pair of arms that reached out to congratulate Charles Leclerc. So, that was good to see.
That
Good
is
day, good
good.
race, good fun.
Yeah, and there was I wonder what the whispers in the air were. The whispers regarding Toto and Christian between Zach.
Oh boy, I don't know. Certainly not a good day really for either for Mercedes or Red Bull.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll be talking about that for at least 2 weeks. So they'll all head to Baku in Azerbaijan 2 weeks from now. Um, but yeah, I think just the way the race got away from McLaren, it kind of got away from Mercedes and Red Bull as well. A lot of wheel banging out there, as we predicted when Chris told us about all the action in the
Yeah.
Formula 3 and Formula 2 and Porsche Super Cup races. So yeah, it happens every week.
Yeah.
Someone
Well,
has a triumph, someone has a tragedy.
All right, well, let me run it down all the way from top to bottom for those on the radio that don't have it in front of them. Charles Leclerc, of course, with the win, followed by Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, followed by Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton in fifth, Max Verstappen down in sixth, George Russell, Checo in seventh, Checo Perez in eighth. I guess you have to say that's still a pretty good finish, only 2 positions behind his teammate. Albon in the points, and K-Mag in the points. I hope I have the freshest of data here. K-Mag in points at number 10, followed by Alonso and Colapinto in 12th. Wow, you got to say that's a successful debut. Ricardo, Ocon, Gasly, Bottas, Hulkenberg, Zhou Guanyu, Lance Stroll in 19th, the last car running, and then Yuki Tsunoda retired. Bob, I have to admit, I was driving, like I said, I missed what happened to Yuki Tsunoda.
He collided. Who did he collide with? I can't remember. I think it was Hulkenberg, who in turn had been hit, which led to a time penalty for Daniel Ricciardo. And before he could even serve the penalty, Ricciardo, that is, Hulkenberg smashed into the side pod of Yuki Tsunoda down in turn one. Tsunoda wound up retiring from the race, the only retirement. And Hulkenberg got a 10-second penalty. And then I think he had a second one added because when he came in to serve it, no, it was Ricciardo, came in to serve his 10-second penalty. The team did not wait long enough. They put their hands on the car within 10 seconds. So we got another one after that. So that was the end of Ricciardo's day. But yeah, Hulkenberg spent some time putting new pieces on the car as well.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, I'm really excited for Kevin Magnussen to finish in the points. He kind of needed that, didn't he? I mean, just
yeah.
I know he doesn't have his seat next year, but I just love that, actually.
Yeah, he drove a feisty race, it must be said. Of course, Kevin is always pretty feisty out there, but both he and Hulkenberg tried some pretty wild and crazy moves. Some worked, some didn't. But yeah, it's good to see K-Mag pick up a point.
Well, I tell you one thing that we're going to have a lot of discussion about, and that is the constructor standings. Not only did Haas add to their tally, but I'm going to look this up because the gap now has changed dramatically. I hope F1.com has it updated. And they do. Red Bull, and this is constructors, Red Bull 434 and only 30 points behind now, McLaren at 404, and now Ferrari at 370. So they're right behind McLaren too. And again, a pretty good gap back to Mercedes at 276. But now let's go down to Haas. And 27 points for Haas, followed by Alpine at 13, and they're right behind RB at 34. So, wow, what a nice shakeup to the constructor standings.
I'm not sure that's accurate. And you're right. And people should know that it takes a while for
F1
for the Formula One points to be updated on their own site, which is pretty sad.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, that 30 point, I think I saw that during the broadcast too, but actually, because it was.
Remember, you and I had a discussion last week because you couldn't remember who got the fast lap at Sandburg.
That's right.
You thought it was 31 points. I said, no, it's 30. So I don't think those have been updated.
So you think it's the fastest lap that's missing?
Well, no, I think those are last week's points.
You think
that's
so?
Not current. No, I think the gap, just off the top of my head, is much smaller than that now. It's going to be a real horse race going to Baku.
Well, we'll check here shortly to find out. But either way, man, it's going to get tight. You're absolutely right. That's the most exciting thing, is that not only constructors, but now the drivers' championship is going to get tight.
Yeah. And Red Bull was in trouble during the race. And I don't know if you heard this on the car, but Verstappen was being overtaken by Piastri, and Verstappen had to ask, do you want me to race him?
Yeah.
Obviously, he was running out of tire. His was trying to get the most laps possible out of the tire. Didn't want to kill it by racing Piastri. And they said, yeah, go ahead. Because I knew they had to make another pit stop anyway, because Verstappen went with 2 sets of hard tires off the top. You have to use 2 different compounds. So he knew he was going to have to change to a set of mediums for the end of the race.
Oh, you're absolutely right on the standings, by the way. I clicked over the driver standings and it's still showing 70. So you're 100% right. Yeah, I knew the constructors were that tight. I don't know what I'm thinking, but yes.
That's all right.
We'll get that updated. Well, we will get that to you when it's updated, because that is really going to be exciting. So But I'm just going to look at the race results, Bob, and talk through this a little bit, because Carlos Sainz at 6-8 laps left in the race, it was Ferrari 1-2, then McLaren 3-4. But Carlos Sainz, his tires just basically gave up, is what it looks like, and then was passed by both McLarens.
Yeah, I actually thought Sainz would be the bigger factor than Leclerc today. But, that's not the way it turned out.
Yeah.
It's still amazing. I'm looking at pictures here.
Well, I'm just thinking, do you think that it was Carlos Sainz tires just gave up? You think that was what was going on with him?
I think so. He had probably the same problem that the majority of the cars were having toward the end of that race. They were using up their tires, that fine balance between racing somebody and making your tires last. From time to time, fans complain about, it's all fuel mileage racing, or it's all tire-based racing. You don't get a flat-out blast. And I think that's what happened to the majority of the field. They tried to race while maintaining their tires, and it just didn't work for a lot of guys. And I think that was a problem for Carlos, who did have to do some passing and defending during the course of the race. So I think that's probably what happened to him. But I think Fred Vasseur is just as happy to have Carlos's points as he is Charles.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I hear Chris's mic lighting up. Chris, how's it going, my friend?
It's busy and hectic, and I hope my signal holds up for you guys, because I've just been out in the pit lane under the podium for that electric atmosphere that you get in Monza. It was incredible. Trying to see if I grab anyone out in the pit lane, but it was chaos. So I've come back into the paddock. Now, I don't know if you've reported this, but we've had confirmation from the FIA that Kevin Magnussen's collision with Pierre Gasly did carry 2 penalty points. So that is a race ban for K-Mag in Baku. So that's going to take the shine off what was actually a good result, wasn't it? You got a point in 10th place today.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we did not report that. We were just excited for Kevin Magnussen to get a point, but I guess that's not going to be what he's thinking about right now. A race ban. Yeah. It's pretty rare these days in Formula One. When's the last race ban we had, I wonder?
I think off the top of my head, it's Romain Grosjean.
Yeah, I would say Grosjean. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't remember if anyone else reached 12 penalty points to get one prior to that. But yeah, Grosjean had one for the collision he caused at the start of the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix. So he actually missed the race here in Monza. I believe it was Bruno Senna that filled in for him, but I might be wrong on that front.
Yeah. Well, your signal sounds pretty good, Chris. You dropped just a tiny bit at the end there, so we'll keep an eye on it. But we were just really starting the show with, wow, Ferrari winning at home. I can only imagine. I think we're not doing the atmosphere justice, and hopefully, Chris, your mic will hold up, because, I mean, Ferrari winning at home, we did talk about the fact that you could hear the crowd on the broadcast, which was just amazing. And the emotions in Ferrari and Monza just must be amazing right now.
It really is, yeah. I mean, the sun's hidden itself for a little bit, which has helped as well. So everyone's gone piling out onto the track, as they always do. But the noise when Leclerc came out onto the podium, and then the noise again for the Italian national anthem. I've never been out there for that moment, to be honest. I've normally just come straight out into the paddock to try and get interviews with people. But it just felt like it was the right place to go. And the noise every lap. We're in the media centre. We're opposite the main grandstand, above the pits and garages. And every lap for the last 10, 15 laps, when the Tifosi realised that Leclerc was going for it on a one-stop, they were cheering him past every lap, every single lap. It was, at first you thought, oh, what's happened? And then you realise, no, it's just Leclerc coming by. They were getting louder and louder. It was incredible. It's one of those where, when people say something's good for the sport, good for F1, that was today for the people here, that was good for F1.
Yeah, can't argue with that. What I think we've had 3 different constructors now in 3 different races. I mean, everything is good for the sport today, but Ferrari winning at home in Monza on strategy, Chris. I mean, let's say that out loud, right? Ferrari winning on with a fast car and on strategy.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll try and get Fred Vasseur later to see if he'll talk about that. He's never one to really get carried away with it, is he? He always tells us that everything's a process and kind of slow moving. But I think they absolutely nailed that today. And it was interesting because There was a radio message that I think was the one to Leclerc that said Norris was starting to struggle, and lap 15 was about the time that the Red Bulls started to suffer from graining on the hard tyre. Now, when they said that, where I was sat, I'm thinking, okay, so it's going to be a stint of the race that will be difficult, but you go through it and then you come out the other side, which is exactly what Ferrari committed to. And maybe they'd learned it from the Red Bull laps that they saw and the pace that Red Bull showed, but they were thinking this will clean up, whereas McLaren thought it won't and came in and changed tyres. So fair play to them, because it was a ballsy move, but I think Piastri also did put it quite well, that if Leclerc pit, he was finishing third. If he didn't pit, there was a point, 15 laps ago or so before he needed to make that pit stop. He probably knew he was finishing third anyway if it went wrong. So they put themselves in a strong position where it was worth gambling. And they did that. That was smart strategy doing that.
All right, I just crunched the numbers. Unofficially, the gap in the Constructors' Championship is 8 points from Red Bull to McLaren.
Wow, that's amazing.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
This McLaren dominance is boring, isn't it?
Exactly. Papaya rules.
Oh,
Yeah,
I will take credit for picking the top three. I just had them exactly backwards.
Hey, you beat Chris and I. What were you going to say, Chris?
I was going to say the saying papaya rules. I can explain that from yesterday.
Yes.
We had it from Andrea Stella explained it. It's what they call the rules that they give their drivers when they're racing each other on track. If you see a car next to you that is papaya, as in your teammate, you give that car more space than you would if it's not papaya. So it's a very, I don't know what the right term is. I don't want to be derogatory, but interesting way of just saying, don't get too close to your teammate, which I don't think you need a saying for.
I wouldn't think so.
When it was said once, okay, interesting, got people talking. When you heard it about the third or fourth time on the radio, I think most people were groaning at it. But anyway, it was good to see that McLaren let them race completely. I still think now, this was probably the first race where I thought could have swapped those positions to give Norris a few more points towards Verstappen, because the trend is still good. That's 2 races in a row where he's taken the 8 points he needs out of Verstappen. If he keeps that rate up, then he'll get to him at the end of the season. But it could have been more, and today could have been a double-figure swing.
You know what, Chris? Though I'm going to side with McLaren on this, because the fact that they've got this papaya rules and that they did not make the drivers change positions. I think they're building a culture here, and you've got to hand it to Andrea Stella and Zak Brown and the whole team. They're building a team culture here that in any sport like this, and let's face it, this is a massive team sport, that I think it's fundamentally a great idea, and it will pay dividends. So kudos to them for building this culture the way they have.
I agree with you on that. The culture is very good there. Sorry, Bob. But one thing I would say is I was speaking to Tom Stallard, who's Oscar Piastri's race engineer, yesterday, and he was talking about how good it is within McLaren, as in it is as good as it looks from the outside. It's very positive. He really likes working there. And he says you see what it maybe looks like at other teams and get an impression of what it might be to work for those. He says he loves working for McLaren. He loves the culture they've created. So I think that does tie in with that. If anything, it's just that basically, and this is a good problem, but for the first time, I watched today's race and thought having 2 very good drivers that are so closely matched and both capable of winning races is actually going to be a problem for them right now. Because if Piastri was maybe a bit more meek or maybe not quite on Norris's level, then Norris probably gets a decent lead at the start of that race and goes on and wins it, or at worst is second to Leclerc with that strategy. But instead, he's lost out some points to his teammate because his teammate did a very good job, did an excellent job. In fact, it was a brilliant overtake.
Yeah, and I think this just puts the pressure on the engineers to keep the car way ahead of everybody else, so they're just battling amongst themselves. I see you smiling, Bob.
Well, I keep thinking back to the fact that Zak Brown was asked or told by his board of directors at McLaren to try to hook Adrian Newey, when he leaves Red Bull this year, into the McLaren organization. And Zak said, no, I won't do that, because having a superstar like Adrian in our organization might mess up the chemistry. We've got a good thing going here. Let's follow the plan. Plan your race your plan, and let's not risk throwing a real hot potato into the mix. And I'd say, based on what we've got right now, it's working. An absolute charm. McLaren just gets better and better. I mean, winning the race in Zandvoort and then in Monza is pretty phenomenal. In two tracks that could not be more different. Now, Baku is going to be another kettle of fish entirely, if you will. And I'm going through every cliche in the book here, but we know Baku has the longest straightaway in the game. Top speed is going to be critical. So is that delicate balance, because there's a lot of tight turns in Baku. It's almost as fast as Monza, but with a lot more tight corners in it. So it's a whole new challenge in 2 weeks' time. And we'll truly find out. I think McLaren could put a real stranglehold on the championship if they come through with this kind of performance at Baku in 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, Charles Leclerc with the win here, but it certainly feels like a win for McLaren with the gaps dropping in both constructors and drivers' championships. And what about, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, the Mercedes race today. How would you grade the Mercedes team today, Chris?
Kind of middle of the road, to be honest. Lewis Hamilton did a good job at the start and did keep it clean and made a bit of progress from sixth, didn't he? Ended up fifth, but they just didn't seem to have an answer for Ferrari's pace. And George Russell with that contact at the start, which did seem from the replays we saw like just a Russell mistake. We'll have to see if that's how it's viewed. Then that really hampered him and put him on the back foot. And he got ahead of Sergio Perez, but not Max Verstappen, and probably should have finished ahead of both Red Bulls, given the pace we saw of the car compared to the Red Bull today. So I think they left a few points out on the table. Realistically, looking at where Hamilton ended up and the way the fight emerged between the McLarens and the Ferraris, maybe they weren't going to get into the top four. They're only going to be fifth and sixth. But still not perfect. And just a little bit scruffy. A few slow pit stops from everyone, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see their debriefing, and I'll see if we can get Toto Wolff a bit later. I've seen him scooting by with his son on the scooter, his electric scooter, in the paddock just now, and his wife Susie's here. But I'm just waiting. I'm doing my normal stalking plan, seeing if I can speak to Christian Horner before he does print press. But he's having a long chat out in the open with Sergio Perez right now. Helmut Marko's joined in as well. They're doing this just on the balcony out the front of the Red Bull motorhome. So it's where everyone walks in and out. Fans can see. Quite a few have gathered below to have a watch. Don't think anyone's really getting close enough to listen. But yeah, there's a lot of animated discussions. Checo's getting a lot of backslapping. I think people are fairly happy with the job he did, actually, because this was a tricky Red Bull. This was not a competitive weekend for them. And I know it's another, 8th place for Perez, but that's with his teammate only finishing 6th. And that's about where the car was. It was the 4th quickest car, I think, this weekend.
Yeah, and Perez could have outqualified his teammate, but he was the good soldier and gave a toe to Verstappen, who edged his teammate by just 1 place. So, yeah, I'd say it was a good weekend for Perez. Not the best, but certainly the kind of progress that Red Bull wants to see.
Hey,
absolutely.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say the one thing I had there was I would need to double check this, but I think Perez was clear to do his own lap and made a mistake. He went off at the second Lesmo, I think. And I think after that, he then aborted and then helped Verstappen. But you're right, he was aware of it, or the team reacted quickly, that he could then do that. And you're right, it meant that his own lap was ruined. So he then helped Verstappen get ahead of him, which probably wouldn't have happened if he hadn't have given him that toe.
We haven't talked about Ferrari with their upgrades this weekend. We talk about their strategy was great. We talked about the drivers drove great. The car was fast, though. We said that, but they had a big upgrade package this weekend. And bringing that upgrade to their home race at Monza turns out to be another stroke of brilliance by them.
You could say. I was going to say, you could say, sorry, I've just got to the BBC's Andrew Benson asking me questions live on air. You know better than this, Benny. You go on 5 Live.
I wondered where he got his information.
No, I steal it from him. They targeted this. I actually asked Jock Clear that question on Friday when they brought the new floor here, and they said it's just a performance upgrade. It's not specific to Monza. And I said, but was there any part of you, because you'd had trouble in Barcelona, so you needed to make sure that this upgrade was right, was there any pressure to get it here to Italy? Because could it have benefited from 2 extra weeks of development to be sure before you released it for Baku, for example? But he said, no, like, we just bring stuff as quickly as we can. If they could have, they would have brought it for Zandvoort, but it wasn't ready for that. So it was here in Monza that they brought it. Also, logistically, it works a lot better, doesn't it? Because it's not very far from Maranello once you release that part, to just drive it up the road a couple of hours to Milan rather than having to get it across a couple of borders to another country about a 10-hour drive or so away. So I think that's why here was always going to be more likely. It just made more sense like that. But you're right, they did a good job and they had it working, which is positive from Ferrari's point of view because of the trouble they had at the Spanish Grand Prix when they brought upgrades there that set them back.
Yep. And hey, we can't argue with the results, right? So I'm just looking here at some of the other results. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and get a break in now, and then we're going to continue to break down the Formula One Italian Grand Prix right after this. All right, let me check in on YouTube. I don't even have it open right now. See what the ladies and gentlemen are doing.
I think there was a 10-point swing in the Drivers' Championship too, so it's 65 now from Verstappen to Norris.
Yeah,
62.
62. Oh,
Should
Norris
be.
also got a point.
Yeah, it was 16 points to Norris and 8 to Verstappen today. So he outscored him by 8 again.
That's
so
right.
70 becomes
That's right.
62.
That's right.
Can you guys hear the Lamborghinis going by my booth?
No.
I cannot.
Well, I can't show you with the camera for multiple reasons, but it's pretty cool. Joe
Normally,
Oysterbay's here, Kevin Kelly, TW's here, all the usual suspects, Andy P. Let's see what Andy P thought about today with his McLaren, the world's greatest United States #1 McLaren fan will say that. Complete fair play to Ferrari today. Hell of a call, and I refuse to be unhappy with P2 and Prix 3. Yep. And almost felt like a win with everything that's happening with McLaren right now, didn't it? Joe Oysterbay says McLaren are pretty close to Red Bull in the constructors now. Yep, I hate that this season is going to end in a few months. It's so good. I love that, Joe. He's already lamenting the end of the season. Kevin Kelly says Ferrari lucked out on the strategy. Chuck was pissed off that they pitted him too early. The green room was a bit awkward, Joe says. Chuck was fine. Yeah, Kevin Kelly says, now will Ferrari win in Austin? That's a good question today, Kevin.
Not out of the
No, certainly not.
realm of possibility.
Yep.
Are you going to take calls, or do you not have the equipment for that out there at the track?
That's a Casey question. Maybe he's listening. What do you say, Casey?
Okay.
Yeah. All right, we'll check on that later.
New show?
City. Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, gearheads, we are relishing in the Charles Leclerc victory at home for Ferrari at Monza. It doesn't get any better than this for Formula One, and the crowd loved it. Charles Leclerc ahead of the two McLarens, and his teammate in fourth was a great race today. Great day for Ferrari in general. And Chris Medland is out there. Chris, I'm assuming it's still hot and nobody cares because Ferrari won. Oh, do we have Chris? Oh, his mic is muted. He made the famous mistake. Oh, maybe he's actually getting an interview.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yep, sorry, I should have checked that. Well, Bob, I mean, look, I know we've said it all before in the last few minutes, but it's just so exciting. Like Chris said, it's good for the sport. It's, sure. And like you heard Andy P on YouTube a while ago, he could live with that as a big McLaren fan. I mean, I think everybody and Charles Leclerc is so likable, right? I think that also helps.
Yeah, and he's had such an agonizing time in recent seasons, assuaged certainly in large part by taking that historic home victory in Monaco earlier this season. And now the Italian Grand Prix at Monza and a Ferrari doesn't get any better than that. I've said forever that what's good for Ferrari, no matter what you think of Ferrari, what's good for Ferrari is good for Formula One. It's just, the case. They've been there since the very beginning. They're so much a part of the lore of Formula One. They've won this race at Monza more often than any other team, taken more poles than any other team. And I think in a subtle way, that's a measure of the sublime support that Ferrari gets from the Tifosi, when they come home.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for Ferrari. It's good for the sport. I can't argue with that. Hey, I'm just looking through the results here. We touched on Colapinto before, but he finished 12th, I believe. Yep, he finished 12th.
Yeah, he did.
And I mean, really, but think about it being only 3 positions behind his teammate Albon, who finished in the points at 9th. And I mean, you have to say that's a great, if not spectacular, start for someone in his first Formula One race.
Well, I think it's certainly a solid start. Comparisons to his predecessor, Logan Sargent aside, a solid run. But he's a kid who was having solid runs in Formula 2, was not leading that championship, but, he was at least up to speed, considering he had little, if any, experience in a Formula One car coming into the weekend. And being stuck on a difficult racetrack in difficult conditions, new surface. We've talked about all this all weekend. Yeah, I'd say it was a very, very solid start, an impressive one. I don't think before the race anybody would have predicted anything above 15th or 16th in the race. So, I think he did a good job.
Yeah, and just those couple of positions, 3 positions behind his teammate, and his teammate has been doing a great job. So,
yeah, but it was that kind of race in so many ways. I mean, no yellow flags after a weekend of people flying off the racetrack, colliding with each other, as happened in the Junior Series races here at Monza. This was surprisingly clean. There was some contact, but only one car out of the race, Yuki Tsunoda, as a result of contact. But safety car never had to be dispatched, which is a good thing since it was crashed back on Friday or Thursday. And it was a surprisingly clean race, I think.
Hey, Chris
by
Medland.
Monza standards.
Chris, I saw you were muted a minute ago. What's going on? Is it still a huge party out there?
It is around Ferrari, yes. There's a bit of head scratching going on elsewhere. I actually was trying to line up an interview when you must have thrown to me because I muted and taken my headset off briefly. I do apologize for that. But I was also being asked by a member of Daniel Ricciardo's team kind of what the feeling was. Was it that Ferrari won it or McLaren lost it type thing? When I said about the way we'd spoken about it so far on the show, he was like, yeah, I think that's about right. Fair play to Ferrari today. So from Ricciardo's side, though, it's just frustration that when he has a decent drive, they think it was an unfair penalty he picked up early on with the 5-second time penalty for crowding Hülkenberg off the track. But he said that the drive itself after that was really strong. Problem is the car isn't quite competitive enough to score points. So you come away and you finish 12th, which became 13th with an additional penalty because of the error at the pit stop by the team. Don't know if everyone saw that, but he came in, had to take his 5-second time penalty at his pit stop. And one of the mechanics touched the car when it came into the pits when they had to not touch it for 5 seconds. So it was just I think an instinctive reaction. But that then meant they get an extra penalty for not completing the penalty properly in the first place. So it became a 10-second time penalty on top. And it demoted him back behind Colapinto. So I think there was frustration there that Ricciardo's good performances from his side aren't getting results. And, this is still a time he wants to shine. But as we said, I think a good performance today didn't really make a difference because Perez didn't do a huge amount wrong in terms of he still could be doing better, couldn't he? Perez could be close to the max, but he's not. This wasn't a weekend where it was his worst by far.
Yeah, true. Hey, what Bob and I were talking about Colapinto. I was a little more impressed by where he finished than Bob. What do you think?
About Colapinto?
Yeah, I was asking Chris what he thinks about Colapinto. What do you think about? Yeah, what Bob was saying that he was a good, solid, impressive, but I thought it was even better. What do you think, Chris?
Yes, sorry, yes. I think that was a very, very strong drive. I think the fact it was error-free and the pace looked good. I think there was a point about halfway where I looked up at the timing screens and had a couple of cars between them, which always creates a bit bigger gap. But it was within 10 seconds of Albon on the same strategy.
Right.
And I was like, that's good form. That's just safe, solid. He's not been overawed by the occasion. He's not made any major mistakes at the start. So yeah, that was very encouraging. I think it's always hard though, isn't it? Because you get a bit of a buzz as well. Sometimes you see drivers come in. Remember Nick de Vries and the performance he put in here for Williams on his one-off appearance, and then you've got to try and follow that, and it doesn't always happen quite so seamlessly. So right. I hope the main thing that Colapinto now will need to do is take the learnings from this and try and just build on it, and not take a huge leap in Baku, for example, and go and put the car on the wall anywhere. If he keeps it clean, he's going to really impress Williams, I think, because clearly the pace is strong enough, and he basically today did what I imagine Sargent would have done, so somewhere in the same ballpark, and he kept it, didn't damage the car, which is the main thing right now.
Yeah, compare it to Kimi Antonelli. I mean, both in a car for the first time in this environment. Antonelli had more, old car practice, let's say, than Colapinto did, but Antonelli did 2 spectacular laps and then threw it on the wall. Colapinto got through a clean weekend, which I'm sure was what Williams wanted most, and it gives a good basis to continue. It kind of makes you wonder about the strategy of having Colapinto for the last 9 races of the season before Carlos Sainz arrives. Colapinto might be making a name for himself in a record time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Chris talked about him learning, right? Well, he got today a chance to learn he had 37 laps on his tires. So he was learning something with how to do a one-stop race and run those hard tires, 37 laps. By the way, Leclerc had 38. And I think K-Mag had 39, and Daniel Ricciardo had 42 laps on his tires. So plenty of long stints on those hard tires. Verstappen had switched to the mediums. Not too many people on the mediums. But yeah.
No, most started on them, didn't they? And went medium, hard. And there was a point where Red Bull said to Verstappen, hold back, let them all destroy that medium tire. I don't know if we can say that. Yeah, I don't know if we can say people destroyed the medium or just quite early committed to a likely 2-stop, apart from Ferrari. So that was more the sort of message that could have been ominous. And then when you see the race pan out, you realise Red Bull's perspective, they didn't have the pace, even with a different strategy approach, to make any inroads from where they were. And there was a point when Verstappen was told to push before his first pit stop, I think it was, and he didn't go any quicker. There was no improvement in his lap time. If anything, it went slower, and that's when you knew, okay, they don't have it today. But I can let you guys know that I am in position to speak to Zak Brown in about 5 minutes' time. I'm going to go and try and find Ayao Komatsu in a bit as well, to see if we can learn a bit about what's going to happen at Haas with that Kevin Magnussen ban. Then ideally, I know we spoke to him on the grid, but Christian Horner's reaction to that race and kind of where Red Bull go from here would be telling, because this feels like the first weekend when Red Bull looked a bit deflated as a team. It wasn't quite so punchy, the stuff we heard. I said it on the grid, didn't I? When we got the answer from Horner, top 5 was his best case scenario, which they didn't hit. But he said it with a kind of resigned grimace.
Yeah, like he wasn't inflating that number at all, and was almost hopeful that they would even get there. So
yeah, right. That was the best we can do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, and I think that may be just as big, if not the biggest story of the weekend, is just the fact that the Red Bull pace. Could anybody have predicted this? How it's just, they've basically been stagnant while everybody else has grown, or have they even taken steps back from the beginning of the year? It's hard to say, but it's really pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I've been saying for years that what we need after a race, in addition to the top 3 coming to address the media, there should be a wild card interview. What other big story in the race, needs to be represented. And I think in this case, we'd love to hear from Max Verstappen. What went wrong? By your standards, this was a mess. But nobody asked me.
He will speak to the media now. He does the broadcast pen, basically. So he'll go around the whole set of broadcast media, TV crews, and will answer questions about how the race went. They get a question or two each is all they're allowed. So the drivers get a bit annoyed that it gets quite repetitive. And then he will go to the print pen where probably 3 or 4 minutes worth of just group questions. So that covers all manner of topics normally. But one thing that is sure, they're not obliged to do a certain amount of time. And sometimes, I should tell you what, just to paint a picture, my wife's come looking for Zak Brown. I've been told I've got to walk Zak Brown to the Sky F1 stage. So I'm actually helping the marital situation here by getting this interview in a second.
You do what you got to do, Chris.
Exactly. The sacrifices I make. So I must say that the way that drivers can do it if they've had a bad day is give one-word answers and very short answers and then move on. And they can be out of here. Yeah. So sometimes you don't get all of the detail. Max is normally quite good, though. He will normally talk. So if I actually see any quotes from him, sadly, it's very hard to doorstep the drivers post-race, given that they head into debriefs, going to get changed, whatever, and they've done that big block of media themselves, which is why we quite often get the bosses who have a good overview, at least, of what's gone on. The driver's perspective is always great, but they're sometimes limited from within the car of what they're aware of. So we will see how Red Bull see it from Christian Horner's perspective in a bit, hopefully. And Zak Brown, when he finally emerges from this lovely McLaren team hub, where I've been told to linger.
Well, just tell him that I think that their culture and the way that they're managing all of that, I think it's spot on.
Well, I might give him both sides of the coin. I might tell him what I said as well. I'm sure he'll side with you, John, more than he'll side with me.
I'm taking the easy route, Chris.
Well, I can certainly see your point. I think it's a fair point of view to have, and it's one that could well benefit the team moving forward. But whether it has immediate payback, I'm not too sure. I just feel like today was a day when they maybe needed to make a more harsh call. We spoke to Zak yesterday, didn't we? And it seemed like they were going to have that talk. It sounded like they were maybe going to talk about team orders and start to implement them. So the fact they didn't was actually a bit of a surprise to me.
I'd like to get some time with Andrea Stella too. I know he has given you some interviews, but I'd just like to hear his perspective on this too, because as Zak Brown, it gives him a ton, if not all the credit for the success of the team really lately.
Yeah, he does. And I actually did try and get Andrea tonight. I dropped a message to ask if I could speak to him, but because Zak's here, I'm told Zak's kind of handling more media and Andrea needs to disappear. What was the actual message I got? That he's leaving track shortly after the team photo and engineering, so he's not really going to be stopping at any point. He's got back-to-back demands before he goes anywhere, but at least we do get Zak's perspective. And
well, sure, yeah. And
generally, he's punchy, isn't he, Zak? He's honest on the whole. Yeah. But you're right, Stella's a great talker. We've had him a bunch of times really explaining things nicely and honestly, and sometimes pretty brutally as well when we think back to Austria.
Yeah, I don't remember his comments, but I'm just thinking he seems like a cerebral guy, and he's obviously been successful. So I just I'd like to hear his perspective. But Chris, as there's still fans roaming around out there and celebrating and partying?
Oh, absolutely. In the paddock, it's less celebrating and partying because these are generally guests of teams or of Formula One, and they're more milling around. They've probably had a pretty big day, but kind of looking at who can they see, like who's around, who can we maybe try and get a photo with or whatever. They're a little bit more calm and reserved in here, actually, than you'd expect. The other side of the pit building, though, on the track, is still packed with Ferrari fans, mainly Ferrari fans, singing and letting off flares. It's a great atmosphere. So it must be said that there's something special about this place anyway, but when Ferrari wins, it's doubly so.
Magic Monza.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Chris, are you still? We gotta get a break in sometime soon. But how's it looking with Zak Brown?
Well, I'm still waiting out the front of the building. I was told in about 5 minutes, about 8 minutes ago. So with timekeeping, that's poor from McLaren. I'm going to have a word with them about that. But yeah, it's looking like it should hopefully be very soon. Because the fact that I joke about it, but the fact that my wife's here waiting means they are waiting to get him down to Sky as well. So they know he has multiple demands on him, and I'd be worried if we took a break that we'd miss him. So that's why I'm doing my normal waffling.
No worries.
Well, when you see him, congratulate him on Pato Award winning the first of 2 races on the Milwaukee Mile last night.
Yeah.
Yeah, good win.
That's IndyCar.
Yeah. A very good win for Pato, wasn't it? So, I mean,
Yeah.
I can't think. Would this have been the first McLaren double if they'd have gone and converted this weekend?
Ooh, great question. I think tentatively, yeah, it would be the first time they won on both ends. Yeah, very Penske-like. God, that'll take some research.
Can you guys hear Jonathan Green's voice bleeding over from the booth next door? Because I certainly can. No. I know you find that hard to believe.
What's he screaming about now?
I don't know. The Lamborghinis, I think, have just finished the race. Maybe I don't know what. With my headphones, I can't quite hear make out what he's saying, but he's definitely bleeding through the walls. No, there goes another Lambo. So they're still racing.
Maybe he poured some coffee in his lap or something.
No, he's just being excitable Jonathan Green. So,
oh, that's so unlike him.
Oh, well, Chris, we'll keep waiting on. You know what, Chris? What are we at? 10:18. You know what? I'm looking at the production notes. We're fine to hold on. We're fine to hold on for
beautiful.
Zak Brown.
I'm hurrying them up. I've never done this before, but I'm just saying to McLaren, say, hey, what's happening? Got us waiting out here.
Yep. Hey, Bob, when's the last time you've been to Monza?
Oh boy, great question. It's been quite a while now. Probably not since 2008 or 09. It's been a long time when we stopped actually going to races and converted to calling them from a studio, first for ESPN. In the Speed Vision years, we never went to a race except the U.S. Grand Prix and occasionally the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. So it's been quite a while.
Special memories from there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite. People ask all the time, what's your favorite racetrack in the world? And I was always split between Monza and Spa. I've pretty much thrown my hat in with Spa, but Monza's got so much going for it, so much that's Italian. I mean, here you are in Milan, the center of international haute couture, La Scala, center of international opera, the Duomo, perhaps the greatest of all cathedrals, the food, the park where the cars race, the more than century-long history of Monza, which has seen everything from the race of 2 worlds, when sports cars and Indy cars raced Formula One cars for a couple of years. And AJ Foyt was considered too young or too inexperienced to drive his upright roadster in the race of 2 worlds. So they replaced him with a veteran driver named Fangio. Gosh, what else? The place was a tank depot during World War II as the Allies closed in on Central Europe. It's just a fabulous place. Lake Como and the Alps are not that far away. Lots of good vistas. As I've said before, I'm sorry to see from those aerial shots all the trees that have been cut down, which is odd for Italy because they have a very strong Green Party. Environmentalists, they do not want to see trees cut down. But down there at the Lesmos, suddenly you can see the sky, which didn't used to be the case when the trees came right down to the racetrack. And you can walk out there in the forest, where lovers have carved their initials in trees, or the sound of the race cars reverberates through. And actually, there's a very cool aspect of Monza I discovered early on is there's a commercial center, little shopping mall, if you will, just behind the paddock with some great, great shops with stuff from the sublime to the ridiculous, including a shop that was called Colombo, that was owned by a lady and her family, and they had owned it, since the 50s, maybe earlier than that. And drivers had come in, and she would have them autograph the door to the back room at the shop. So you'd see Fangio and Jackie Stewart and Graham Hill and all these great drivers' signatures on the door of this shop, which got more attention than all the beautiful items in the showcases.
That's great, Bob. That was a fantastic picture you just painted.
Well,
I'm here and I was still lost in it.
The yellow shirts too, the guys who work at the track. I mean, a lot of them are very advanced age. I went there with Derek Bell for some reason. I can't remember why. And this would have been, in the 90s at the very earliest. And we're walking behind the paddock toward the shops that I just mentioned. And this old guy in his yellow jacket standing at the gate is like, Signor Bell, and he starts jabbering away with them. I mean, he remembered Derek Bell from the years when Derek raced there as a Ferrari driver, in addition to a Porsche engine. So you have that sort of thing too, which is always great to see. These people not only know what they're looking at, they appreciate it, and they've been involved in it for so many years. That's the essence of what's really cool about this sport.
And you know what? To add to that, I just stumbled across Charles Leclerc's tweet. It is a fantastic photo. It is him on the podium taking a selfie with the Tifosi in the background, and it kind of looks like it goes on for infinity, but it's the crowd swarming the racetrack with Ferrari flags waving, and it's an amazing photo. And I think it's helping me picture what you just saw, Chris. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I've had apologize that we're still waiting. I found out that the reason Zak Brown is keeping us waiting is he's in a meeting with the Crown Prince of Bahrain right now, who's obviously one of the main shareholders in McLaren. So it's not someone you normally skip out on to say, I want to go and talk to Chris Medland on the radio. So I'm afraid that we're second in line for that. But in this delay, I've actually just seen some photos from the podium that, as everyone knows, my wife Jess works for Sky Sports. She was up there with Sky doing TV. They had their presenters. They were allowed, because I think Nico Rosberg did the post-race interviews for Formula One. They were allowed a spot on the podium after the podium shot. So, in fact, that photo that you've just been shown, never mind, I'll shut up because Zak Brown's here. Zak, second and third today. Where did that one get away from you?
The drivers did a fantastic job. The fastest lap, car was great again. I think Ferrari, and hats off to them, got kind of a free kick there in that, they're running P3, go for it. If it works, you win. If it doesn't, you finish P3. So, they had the benefit of being able to take that gamble, and it worked for them. So hats off to them, especially here in Monza. And overall, very good day. 2 cars on the podium again. I think that's now 12 in a row. And I'm getting conflicting reports, whether it's 8, 9, or 10 points behind Red Bull, but it's getting closer. But Ferrari's not far away. So I think we might have a 3-way race for the championship here before the end of the year's over.
On the driver's front, though, you almost hinted at team orders yesterday. Clearly didn't implement them today with that first lap. Was that nervy? And then did you feel that maybe you should have been switching them at the end of the race?
No, Lando ran along there. We had some discussion about what we wanted to do there. At the end of the day, the papaya rules are race each other hard but fair, and don't touch each other. And that's what they did. So, we'll take it one race at a time.
But if you're going to get to Max, surely you've got to put all your eggs in one basket now.
Yeah, there's some logic behind that. There's also a lot of racing to go. And, Oscar's helped Lando a lot over the course of the year in different ways. Sometimes that's visible, sometimes that's not. So, and Andrea and I just take it one race at a time.
Well, I can tell you that John in the studio backs the papaya rules. He's a big fan of it. I said should have backed Lando. So you got to split in the studio as well. Can't even pick it here.
Yeah, exactly. It's not an easy decision.
Right, thanks for your time. Well done.
Cheers.
I like that, Chris. Thank you. But yeah, look, you the logic, of course, is you're going to give as many points as you can to the guy closest to Max, which is, of course, Lando Norris. But still, it's really good to see that. And like he said, there's plenty of racing left, so we shall see. Well, let's go ahead and get a quick break in now that we got Zak Brown, and we'll be back after these messages. All right, let's see. Man, the Lambos sound good and look cool, man. Y'all are missing it. God, the weather. We thought it was supposed to rain today. It's really beautiful outside. I wish I could turn my camera around, but I can't turn my camera around because it might dump over the vice grips that I'm using as my mic stand.
Much less the international television rights.
Yes, besides that, that's true.
Who cares about those?
Let's see what's happening on YouTube. Oh yeah, it's, talking about Kimi Antonelli a little bit. Joey Bay did, but I saw Kimi Räikkönen was there. Not only was Kimi Räikkönen there, and we talked about Rick Astley, but I think I saw Daniel Craig. Any other big stars there, Chris, that you saw?
Carlos Alcaraz, who I mentioned on the grid, the tennis world number 1, I think, who should
Yeah,
be in
is.
the US Open, but he got knocked out early in a shock defeat. So he was here with Alpine. There was someone he was with that I didn't recognize, actually, I'll admit, who was getting a lot of attention. Alessandro Del Piero, who is a Italian soccer legend who waved the checkered flag, actually. When I saw him in the pit lane, that was a bit of a young me thinking, wow, I used to watch that guy. He was magic. And I hated it because he played for Italy and normally beat England. So yeah, there was some good stars here. But there was a lot of the Italian Olympic team as well. So they pulled them in here. I think Milan is an attractive city for a lot of people to come to.
Oh, no question. Of course, the Vienna Film Festival or Venice Film Festival is going on right now. So a lot of the big cinema stars are out there on the gondolas.
Yep, I'm just checking some social media here, see what's anything happening and see what the fans are saying. Go ahead.
I'm George Russell, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
George Russell bringing us back. What did you think of his race today, Mr. Varsha?
George Russell?
Yeah.
It's a fine line between hero and zero. He was aggressive, as we've come to expect. Great move, great start, which is becoming a habit with George. But I think maybe just pressed a little too hard early on. I think every driver in this field knew if you're going to pass someone, you needed to do it early because it was going to get really difficult thereafter. But I think George continued to press the issue. He had that damage to his front wing early on that required a pit stop, and the pit stops were slow. As Chris Medland mentioned earlier, up and down the pit lane, people were having trouble. Martin Brundle put it down to the heat, not only in the air, but in the machinery around this unique racetrack that is so blindingly fast. And, he just couldn't recover after a while, just like Lewis, who I think he would have equaled, if not beaten, had Russell not had to make that pit stop. I think he would have had a better day. Would he have won the race? No, I don't think so. But he might have been in there for a podium. So, he's going to have to look in the mirror and see what he can do better next time.
Well, and his teammate, Lewis Hamilton, was so upset with his qualifying yesterday. I'm sure he was a little happier with his race finish today. And
well, not a whole lot, I suspect, because he qualifies 6th and finish 5th? I can't remember.
You're right. He moved up 1. So
yeah,
from 6th. That's exactly right. He was at 6th and 5th.
Yeah, I think Lewis is pretty disgruntled for a guy who's won this race 5 times.
That one place as well was George Russell's position, wasn't it? From the damage he picked up and the start. So, maybe it will frustrate him a little bit that he didn't make more gains, or maybe it does point out, if qualifying had gone more smoothly and you're starting ahead of the Ferraris, you have a better chance of beating them. But on the whole, I think it just looked on race pace like McLaren and Ferrari just had that little bit extra. But I wanted actually one of you guys just to confirm for me while you can check. When Zach there said there was confusion over the points gaps, it's the gap to Ferrari I'm actually interested in after today.
I just brought it up. I literally just brought it up right before you said that, because all of us have been speculating, and I got it completely wrong at the start of the show. But so right now, constructors, Red Bull 446, McLaren 438, so 8 points there. He got that right. But back to Ferrari 407, so 31 is what they're showing here on F1.com right now.
31 behind.
That's right, 438 to 407.
Right. Okay. So they're nearly, they're over 40, or they're 39 behind Red Bull, but that is still a gap that's closed a lot. I mean, it was McLaren's Red Bull was 30 before today, and we were talking about the potential for McLaren to take the lead. So the fact that Ferrari are now basically the same gap is a pretty big swing. And as we were saying with Baku earlier, I think Baku will really suit the Ferrari. I think Charles Leclerc has a good chance of going and winning that race again, or certainly being in there. And something that Red Bull have as a problem that they say they have not resolved, and is a separate issue to the balance issues they've been having, is the car's still not very good over curbs and bumps. So that's the street circuit. It's actually not the worst. You don't do a huge amount of curb riding in a number of the corners there, but it's not great. So that could be another struggle for Red Bull.
Yeah. And they've been having that struggle for how many races now? Since before Monaco? So quite a long run with that. Hey, Chris, where were we? We were at 70 points in the driver's championship, driver standings coming in, right? Was Max Verstappen 70 over Norris? Because it's still showing that same gap right now. Maybe they haven't updated the drivers.
Yeah, that sounds like they haven't, but it should be 62 now. Because, Lando 15 for third place, 1 extra point for the fastest lap again, which I think was good damage limitation from his point of view to get that across the line with the final lap. And then where Max finished in 6th is 8 points. So it'll be another 8-point swing. Essentially the same as the first and second situation in Zandvoort, but it just felt like there was more on offer today.
Well, that's something we haven't talked about for the second straight week after Zandvoort. Norris set fast lap of the race on the last lap. Now, after all this hand-wringing throughout about what kind of shape are the tires in and, are they going to get to the finish, yada, 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 no great, closing down of gaps between cars. And Norris pops in this fastest lap of the race on used, he would have been on used hard tires at that point, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I got that wrong because I think the McLarens were closing up on Leclerc at the end there. No question they weren't going to get to him, but apparently they were also closing down the gap between the two McLarens because Norris still had the wherewithal to set fast lap of the race on the last lap. And I'm not aware, did anybody go to the pits for a set of softs to try to, no. Nobody.
Not at the front, no. There was a strange late pit stop for Lance Stroll. I'm not really sure why on that front because he wasn't in the top 10, so he wasn't going to get himself an extra point for that. Whether it was a slow puncture, some damage, there could be a number of different reasons why you might do that. But we heard the car come in and everyone was like, "Oh, who's that now?"
He finished 19th.
I was going to doorstep Ayao Komatsu. I think I'm going to have to get second in line behind Sky because I think Karun Chandlok's just been on the phone to him. Who I think they've gone running around. Right, I'm going to tell you what, Ayao, we'll walk and talk and do it. How are you happy with the point?
Yeah, I'm happy that we scored a point, but it could have been 2 points. So it's a bit of a mixed feeling. I think it's good that in Monza, where we haven't been competitive for a few years, that we are competitive. So yeah, bit mixed.
And just a question on Kevin and that penalty. That looks like a race ban for him. Is that how you understand it? How will you react to that?
Yeah, it's a time penalty. So we cannot do anything. And then we just accept it. And then just have to put a flying price. It's a shame because Baku, I think Kevin would be very strong. That's a circuit where he's strong. So yeah, it's a shame. But yeah.
Does Ollie go in?
I cannot say at this minute. I need to get confirmation from Fred. So please, no, it's TBC.
We'll wait and see. Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, that is too bad, isn't it? If you're talking about Kevin having a strong race after. God, what a horrible way to have you get a point and then get a race ban. That's horrible for Kevin.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For those who don't know what we're talking about, it's been misbehavior, I suppose the stewards would say, on the track that scored now 12 penalty points, which you get on top of any on-track or post-race penalty. And that is an automatic one race ban. So Kevin Magnussen will be out of the car.
Hey, Chris, Kevin online says that Chris Farley is there. Excuse me. Excuse me. Did I
Chris
say Chris
Farley?
Jim Farley.
Jim Farley from
his
Florida.
cousin.
Cousin Chris.
Not the late
Chris.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him actually. As I said, we saw Greg Maffei just at the end of the pre-race show. I did see Jean Todt, the former FIA president, was here, as is current FIA president Mohammed Ben Sulayem. Actually, they unveiled a new car for the FIA Formula 3 Championship 2 days ago, and all of the sort of bigwigs were here for that. But again, it seems to draw everyone in. But no, I can't say I've seen Jim Farley. I'm just making my way down towards Red Bull where he would be. But it's quite interesting that some people do escape quite quickly after a race when they come as a guest. Yeah. Others like to hang around. They like to soak it up if they don't come on.
What would really be breaking news is if you saw Chris Farley. That would be the breaking news.
Dear God. Ugh.
One of my favorites of all time, by the way. I was just telling someone they didn't know that Jim Farley was Chris Farley's cousin. They thought I was joking, and I was like, no. Andy P says that would have been a heck of a get for you, Chris Farley. But
I'm just pleased that I got Komatsu before Sky did there. Because I could have helped him find them. I was like, you know what? I'm getting in here first, and I'll walk him to them. So
how will that go over tonight? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a long. We've got a 2-hour drive in the car later together, but it'll hopefully everyone will have calmed down by then because I won't get out of this track for a good 3 or 4 hours now with how busy it is.
We had some guys online. Woodsource says the driver's positioning should be secondary to the absolutely obtaining manufacturer championship. Woodsource, he's siding with with you, Chris, basically on the logical side of McLaren. I can't argue. It's absolutely true.
It's tough, isn't it? I think there's part of us as well as just fans want to see, a lot riding on every race going all the way down to the wire. And if you swap the two cars, you get the same points result. But if one driver then still can close in the Drivers' Championship, I mean, look, Las Vegas are licking their lips right now because it's looking like there'll be a title fight still going when we get there. A chance, if everything stabilizes from here, that it could be won there. But if not, then it will really be teeing up for the final 2 races of the season. So we'll head into that triple header at least with a lot on the line, which would be great. But realistically, I feel like after today and what was on offer and the way that panned out, I'd be disappointed if it doesn't go at least to Vegas. I feel like this is a season that now should go to at least the penultimate race, if not the last race, and have a decider.
Yeah,
I agree. Yep.
Yeah, good for the sport for sure. In fact, I think Woodsource said that exact thing. Yeah, he said, "Settle it. Who's number one in North America? We'll take it. Vegas. I think it's not possible. Austin, is it, Chris? Well, I guess it's possible.
Mathematically, actually, right now, could it be? No, I don't think it would be. With how many races have we left? After Austin, there would be 4, correct? Of which 2 would be sprints. If Brazil's a sprint, am I remembering that correctly? I'm trying to do my maths in my head. So Max would need a lead of 116 at least at that point, and he's currently 62. So if he wins the next 2 races, that'll give him 50. So it's give him 112. A maximum of 50 or 52 with the fastest lap. Anyway, I think I've worked out. No. Well, Austin, it could maybe mathematically be the first place, but hugely unlikely.
Yeah, hugely unlikely. And look, I want to go back to this discussion about what's going on at McLaren, the culture and everything. I of course mathematically, but what my point is the culture is good for the team, which is in turn good for performance, right? I mean, ultimately, what's good for the team is going to be good for points. So I know that's getting out there a little bit, but it happens in every sport. So that's what I meant by all of that, because I think that it could end up being good for them. So
that's a fair point. Very fair point. I mean, like we said, and that's why I said it to Zach. Like there's 2 sides to it that are worth arguing about. Essentially, it's not clear cut either way, and we'll probably get to reflect heavily at the end of the season on what we believe should or shouldn't have happened. And it could well be that if McLaren go and win both championships, then we're going to have to take our hats off to them and remember moments like this where they held their nerve of their principles and how they want to go racing. If they don't, these are the ones that will get questions asked.
Cool to think that those last 2 races of the season, too, are at accessible television times here in the United States.
Yeah. Good point. Bob, we have barely mentioned one of the best drivers in the history of the sport, Fernando Alonso, who finished 11th today. It's just been this no man's land for Aston Martin literally all year, and right now in the constructors' standings. I've been joking all along that it's kind of the midfield all by themselves there.
Yeah, it's been difficult. We talk all the time about how one team is doing well and then, just kind of falls off a cliff. And Aston Martin has been one of those in terms of performance. Fernando Alonso, all other things being equal, including money, took a look at Aston Martin and decided to sign up with the team into the indeterminate future. Lance Stroll isn't going anywhere, but his performance, if the car improves, his performance is going to have to improve. And I'm sure Lawrence Stroll, who's not a man renowned for his patience as team owner, wants results as well. If it's true that Adrian Newey has been enticed and will soon announce that he's going to Aston Martin, I wish they would do it soon and put him to work. Start making things happen there at Aston, because they're positioning themselves to be a real year in, year out contender. And they're getting the kind of resources that we think of when you think of Formula One, massive glass enclosed factories and wind tunnels and all that kind of stuff. So, the question goes on, what is it that's holding Aston Martin back? Because they really look to be the class of the midfield at one point.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, have you ever interacted with Lawrence Stroll?
Very briefly. And generally in more group settings. I was actually meant to have an interview with him for a magazine I know he reads, Motorsport magazine in the UK, the really old classic green covered magazine, because he's apparently he likes that mag and he has that on his office desk. And it was meant to be here, I want to say last year, but maybe the year before, and it never came together for some reason. I can't remember what led to it being postponed, but essentially you're reminding me that I never followed up as to whether we could do it again sometime. So maybe I'll push some buttons to see if he'll speak to us on the radio, and if not, that I can at least do that interview and bring you a better answer next time.
Well, I ask you that because Bob said he's not known for his patience, which I think is probably fair. But my impressions of him are solely from Drive to Survive. When I watched him interact with, I guess it was Otmar Safnar at the time.
Yeah.
And he just
that company
like,
meeting.
Yes. Yeah. And he just looked like he walks into the room and just talk about command a room, and everybody almost shaking in their boots, everybody that works for him, which
no question. Yeah, he walked in and said, I'll give you 10 minutes, impress me. I've only met him once, and it was at Pebble Beach 4 or 5 years ago, where he had one of his fabulous Ferraris in his collection, a 330 Prix, one of only about 3 or 4 ever built, was in the final cut for Best in Show. And at Pebble Beach, as you may know, competition cars never win Best in Show. It always goes to some elegant, classical era car. But he had a car in the finals. And when I met him, he was sweetness and light, because there was a third guy in the conversation, and that was Sir Jackie Stewart, who Lawrence was trying to convince to drive this Ferrari up onto the ramp there when they announced that it had won at least the competition category. So I can only attest from firsthand experience that Lawrence Stroll is a hell of a guy. But as you say, in Drive to Survive and elsewhere, he's earned the reputation as being a face like thunder, as they say, and he demands respect and obedience.
I thought you were going to say he was being nice to you because you would talk nice about his car, but winning Best of Show at Pebble Beach requires you to remove that last blade of grass out of the tread of your tires to make your car perfect.
Right. You have to turn every screw so that they all point in the same direction.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with our last segment of today's show. Back after this. All right, still live on YouTube here. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, I think Kevin Kelly, let me go back to what he said. He said Jim Farley was in Ted's notebook. That's what it was. he was there with Red Bull. I expected Jim Farley here this weekend because there's Mustangs racing in WEC, and then there's the Mustang Challenge. Man, I really learned a lot about this Mustang Challenge series. It's really cool. It's unbelievably well supported by Ford. Just crazy amounts of support. Y'all should look into it because I think it's still an expensive sport. It's like $145,000 for a race car, but it's really well organized, really cool. Very cool.
As you would expect, a Ford Motor Company.
Yep. Mike Bowles says Zach favors letting them race, and good for him. TW says living in a van down by the river. Yes, that is one of my favorite comedic lines of all time. Yeah, it's Chris Farley. Right. That was the same episode of Saturday Night Live where he crashed through the coffee table in the living room. That was one of my favorites of all time. Andy P says the McLaren debate is really about building for many years and is going all in now. The gap is such the more attainable goal is the constructors. If Lando wins within even 50 points, it's more of an issue, but not yet. Y'all can understand the way I stumbled through reading that.
Proud of you.
I think I got it. I was actually just getting some tips on what might be happening in the driver market in terms of we're not expecting a lot of movement for a long time from Stake, Sauber, Audi because, well, they're basically last to go and they can take their pick under no pressure from anyone. So they will just they will wait and see and kind of analyze every option and play them off each other.
All right, coming back.
Hi, this is Karun Chandok, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back. I think I'm going to go out to Chris Medland at Monza, and we're now more than an hour past the race. I just want to give us your eyes and ears of what it's like over an hour past the race, Chris.
It's still remarkably busy. I am admittedly stood outside Ferrari because I was going to try and doorstep Fred Vasseur after he's done his print media session that's currently taking place on the second floor of their 3-story motorhome. So they've got 2 big square red motorhome units that are very imposing, very impressive. And one is team only, and that's where they have their partners in, their guests. And then one allows media in as well. And the media are allowed up to the second floor where Fred does his big print session, sits down on a stool at one end of the room, and everyone kind of crowds around to hear what he has to say about the day. And outside of these two, well, actually, outside the media one is pretty sparse. There's probably about 20 people. But outside the team one, where all the team members come in and out, they're still completely packed with people. Fans are trying to catch a glimpse of anyone they know. They're hoping, obviously, for the drivers to return. They'll actually do a team photo, celebratory photo in the pit lane in 20 minutes. So it will mean everyone streams out of there across into the pit lane. And that's why all the fans are hanging around as well. I did actually have a rival team member say that they swear there's some underhand tactics that go on at this race because it's always far more busy and certainly around the Ferrari area, but just in general in the paddock in Monza than anywhere else. But it's just people generally, honestly, milling around, getting the photos they can get, hoping to grab someone. And at the same time, teams are slowly packing up, but it's much less hectic than normal because this is the final race to use these motorhomes and these engineering trucks. That's it for this season in terms of the European season. From now on, all the races are flyaway races, so air freight or sea freight is used, and the teams use permanent hospitality structures that are put in place by each circuit, so they don't get to take their own. So, it's going to look very different, the paddock in Baku and every paddock from there on out. Singapore is the one that follows as a back-to-back, which is, I can tell you logistically, a nightmare to get between the two of them. But it's, it then gives you those unique different paddocks compared to the one that everyone's probably got used to over the last few months in the European races.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Chris, compared to, say, Zandvoort last weekend, where I think everybody, it becomes a fire drill to get everything packed up, pushed away, get the trucks on the road. I would imagine that this, as you mentioned, being the last race of the European season, and also the beginning of a 2-week break before the teams turn up in Baku, which really isn't all that far away from Central Europe. I would imagine things might be a little more relaxed.
Slightly, but it is only slightly, because for a lot of the teams, they will go back and work in the factories from tomorrow. They will try. Main thing to get back there, though, is the cars. They don't need to get all the infrastructure set up anywhere else or driven anywhere else in terms of these motorhomes and engineering trucks. But they need the parts that give them performance to get back to the factories, be stripped down, and to be then boxed up and put into the air freight to go to Baku. And you're right; it's not a million miles away. It's a direct flight from the UK. It's about 5 hours, but there's very few direct flights. You basically have to charter a plane apart from one airline that flies there direct, and it's the timing then of getting, it's DHL that do all the logistics for the teams and for Formula One, so they all have to get their main air freight to a certain airport in the UK by a certain day this week for it to then be flown out. So, or probably be at the end of this week. So they don't have a big amount of time to turn things around in that sense. It is just literally the pack down part. Normally, the paddock itself packs down much more quickly, but that side of things, so the chief truckies, essentially, they've got it a little bit easier and they can wait a bit longer before they start work, which again then adds to the situation where more people are just milling around for longer because they're not being told that they need to leave by security because it's getting a bit dangerous.
Yeah, and there's no tremendous urgency to rebuild a destroyed race car. It was a pretty clean race.
Very true. Surprisingly so, because as we said about pre-race, how sometimes it does give the incorrect impression that junior category crashes are going to lead to F1 crashes, and that was the case today. Yeah, we had obviously the Hülkenberg incident with Yuki Tsunoda when he locked up and hit him there, and Tsunoda had to retire. I saw Tsunoda go into engineering a few moments ago, and he was not looking particularly happy, but at least it wasn't his fault. I guess he can take that from it. But then obviously, Ricciardo and I believe Hülkenberg again, they didn't even touch with the incident that got Hülkenberg his penalty. Ricciardo his penalty. And then there's the Magnussen and Gasly one. Again, not heavy contact, and both cars continued. So that's all I can think of aside from George Russell's broken front wing. Yeah. So what I can say, though, as I was getting distracted by rambling through that, is confirmation that Jim Farley is here. And he's been here all weekend, apparently, since Friday. And I'm told from Red Bull's side, he's been great to have around. So that's a positive because he probably wasn't massively impressed by what he saw this weekend.
That's why they're being nice to him.
I think he's probably seen enough F1 to know it's not normally like this, or hasn't normally been like this for a while. But also, sure. I don't think anyone's pointing any fingers at the engine side of things. So, maybe that will be the one area where he's slightly worried that Ford might do a great job of helping Red Bull powertrains with their 2026 engine. But if the car's still not too good, then they could be in trouble.
All right. So
certainly Jim Farley is a racer, and he knows this is how the sport goes.
Yeah, and Jonathan got to see him out at the Monterey Historics out there, and he was out there racing. Yeah, he's a true racer, and I'm really glad that he's brought all this momentum of racing to Ford. And I think Mark Rushbrook, who's the head of Ford Performance, has a lot to do with all of that too. Man, I was just thinking, what a great boss Jim Farley is for Mark Rushbrook, right? He's Mark Rushbrook, the head of Ford Racing or Performance, and knowing that your boss is passionate about what you're rolling in the company's got to be perfect. Hey, here's we have an update because the advantage of doing an extended post-race show is that we now have the full driver standings. Let me run down those. So Max Verstappen still leads 303 to Lando Norris at 241. So what's that maths, boys and girls? Then Charles Leclerc at 217, not far behind him. Then Piastri at 197, Carlos Sainz 184, Hamilton 164, Perez at 143, Russell 128. And then the big drop back to Alonso, actually in ninth at 50 points, Stroll at 24, Hülkenberg 22, Tsunoda tied with Hülkenberg at 22, Ricciardo 12, Gasly 8, Behrman 6, Magnussen 6, Albon 6, Ocon 5, and none for Zhou, Logan Sargent, Colapinto, and Valtteri Bottas. What was that maths, guys? 360, 62? Yeah.
Yeah, it should be 62 with 8 to go.
That. Yep. Yep, 62 with 8 races. I think that's...
The plot thickens.
Yes, I think that's way more attainable than we thought not that many races ago, Chris. I think I was the one saying, I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, it's going at the right rate right now, but it still to me feels like this weekend could have been a bigger swing. But let's at least take the fact that it's getting closer, and I think Red Bull will be almost satisfied. I am hanging around. I'm seeing a few of their engineers legging it for an airport run. It looks like. I'm wondering if that means Christian Horner might appear soon, but he probably will be too late for us, won't he? If it is, if we're going to go off air in a sec. But I think they'll actually walk away from here and go, car performance. Not good, worrying. But championship picture could have been a much more damaging weekend, certainly in the Drivers' Championship. And that's the one I actually think matters more to Red Bull.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, especially considering the money that comes with the Constructors' Championship, that's what the team principals and team owners are all focused on. All right, did we miss anybody today?
Well, you said Alonso. I wanted to say about Alonso, actually. He missed out on a point by 1/10 of a second. As a result of that Magnussen penalty that dropped Magnussen from 9th to 10th. But Magnussen just got over the line far enough up the road. But that must have been a set of engineers looking at data. But what a job by Albon then to get 9th in the end. Because there were different moments where it didn't look like it was going to happen, actually. That it looked like it was a pretty tricky race. It was getting away from Williams a bit. So bouncing back from a tough Zandvoort with a couple of points was quite impressive from their point of view, I'd say.
Yeah, and I was glad to see Magnussen keep that point because it looked like he was up to 7th at one point, I think it was. And I thought, wow, is he going to be able to hold on to that? But we're almost out of time. Any final thoughts, Mr. Varsha?
A little sadness, I have to say, since Chris reminded us this is the last race of the European season. Everything else will be a flyaway, which is okay, except it'll put it in an awkward viewing window for most of our listeners out there. But Baku and Singapore, two terrific places to see a race take place. And then, of course, all eyes will be on Austin and Las Vegas and Mexico and Sao Paulo before we wrap up in the Middle East, as I said earlier, at a pretty convenient television time of day, at least for those of us on the East Coast. So a lot to look forward to, all the stories we've just talked about in the last 90 minutes and more still to come.
And Singapore's on European time too. So that means the same time zone will be back for one more race in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah. All right, guys, we are out of time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks, Bob Varsha, Chris Medland. And don't forget, we got Wheel to Wheel still coming up this Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, Sunday night with Speed City on the radio in Austin, on our website and our YouTube. We will talk to you Wednesday and next Sunday.